Hi everyone. I just wanted to make a brief YouTube video, and I'm going to be using this for college writing and also for technical communication. During the course of the year at WCCC, I'm actually pretty fortunate because I get to teach a wide variety of classes. In the fall, I always teach an intermediate writing, which is the developmental writing before college writing. I teach college writing, which is Comp 1. Advanced composition, which is Comp 2. I also most often teach technical communication, which is English 162, and just like college writing, a wide variety of students will take that particular class. And during the year, I teach human services writing, which is English 166, and then police report writing, which is English 168. I have taught creative writing, which is English 165, and that's an interesting class, and they also have creative writing too here at the college. And I have done literature a few times, which I've done the Intro to Lit, the English 255 and 256, which are actually pretty good classes. I've tried speech. I'm not much of a speech person. I've done that, done reading, and also techniques of selling, which is in the business department, but I also have a degree in business and marketing. So yeah, I really like teaching at this college, and I like teaching at a two-year school because, I mean, you get a whole wide array of students. I mean, we get students from ages 16 to 80, you know. I've had more than a few homeschool students or students that are doing cyber school, and they also want to take some college classes. And so it's really interesting, and I enjoy it. And I've always enjoyed reading and writing and doing things of that nature. What I wanted to talk to you a little bit today is the types of writing you're going to do professionally, personally, and otherwise, and some of the opportunities you're going to have as a professional. One thing that I really can't stress to you enough, which I think is very important, is when you work somewhere, try to get involved in the company or the organization. The biggest benefit is you get to know your colleagues a lot better, and then obviously you are more effective in your job because you can bring much more to it. And I will illustrate that from my own perspective. At WCCC in this last year, we're starting on middle states, and we'll actually be going through it in 2012, 13, and we'll be done pretty much at the end of 2013. But when you're done with middle states, you get accredited for 10 years, and it's very important because that involves money from the federal government and the state government and other sources. I mean, you can't get Pell Grant, you can't get student grant or student aid without being accredited. So it's very important. And I am a co-team chair on two different standards here at the college. There are 12 standards, so there are 6 different groups, and so I'm in one of the groups, and we're doing standards 1 and 6, and those have to do with institutional effectiveness. And basically here earlier we had to tell middle states, as far as areas we're going to be working on and focusing on, we had to submit a preliminary plan, a proposal. And then as we go through, each subgroup has to do research and has to find out areas for improvement, where we have improved, what types of data we have gathered, and all of that. So it's rather involved, but it's important because it's a self-reflection, it's a self-connection of the college, and so we're looking at what we do well and what we need to improve on. So that has been really good. 10 years ago, when Middle States was here as well, I was involved with the Middle States report writing, just as I am going to be this time. When they actually write the final report, which is approximately 125 pages, our subgroup will submit, but I'm also going to be involved in some of the editing and contributing to it. And typically when you do a longer formal report, that's what you do. You work on it as a group. You typically don't collaborate, or you typically don't do it by yourself. You do it with a larger group. And based on middle states, they have what's called style guides or style guidelines, and you have to follow those. They want headings to look a certain way, paragraphs to be a certain length approximately, they want you to use certain words like hyphenated or, with capital letters, but they have specific style guidelines. And then how you introduce data, where you interject it into the report. If you have additional data, you can put them in as an addendum and as an appendix. And so it's very, very interesting, but it's a good opportunity for a wide variety of people to write. One thing that I wanted to say, if you take a technical communication class, one of the key points that you often talk about in reports, especially longer reports, is technical writing is more redundant and repetitive, which means that you repeat your main findings and conclusions as you go throughout the document. Because, for example, with this Middle States report, it's going to be 125 pages long. The Information Technologies Department, the College Resources Center, the College Learning Center, different parts of the college, people from those areas will want to read about their area, allied health and nursing, online education. So typically that's why you have to repeat your findings and conclusions. Most recently, we applied for a grant from the Walmart Foundation. We're involved in Achieving the Dream, and we're going through we're trying to get a grant as a leader college. It's $100,000 for us to improve the programs and some of the things that we do here. And so I was with a group of, I think there was like 10 of us who that were part of the group. And then the WCCC Educational Foundation grants writer, her name is Pam. She was the one that got it organized and had it all put together. And so that's another example. And this year, myself, Darlene Pappas, who teaches reading, Judy Sharon, who teaches computer science, and my boss, Dr. Andrew Barnett, we did a presentation at the Achieving the Dream National Conference, and we talked about how we added more consistency and how we got better outcomes from 3 particular courses: computer science, we did one, a reading course, and an English course. And it was really interesting, but we had to submit an initial proposal, and then through the Achieving the Dream site, and then they told us if the proposal was acceptable or not. It was acceptable, it was accepted, but they said you're going to have to tweak this. You're going to have to change the title, and you're going to have to make it more descriptive. So we had to play around with it and resubmit it. And so then they also wanted us to write a 125-word description to include in the booklet that for the national conference. So we did that. And fortunately, we were in the first group to present, so we had a big audience. I would imagine we had about 100 people, and it was a good opportunity for us to present, but it was a good opportunity for WCCC. And so that was interesting, that you go from the beginning and you go the whole way through, then you do this presentation. Fortunately, Judy Sharon and Darlene Pappas are very, very good with numbers, but also technology, and they did a really beautiful PowerPoint presentation. My boss, as I said, Dr. Andrew Barnett, he was very helpful with us for numbers, and so that was useful. And then most recently here at the college, we're trying to add even more consistency to our online courses. And so myself and again Judy Sharon, we worked on a proposal for something called Quality Matters. And that is, it's a national-wide initiative to improve the delivery of online classes, but also to say that our classes meet certain standards and they are consistent and they meet certain criteria. So it's kind of a benchmark, just like they have like that ISO 9000, that sort of thing, that you reach certain standards. So like I said, a few of us worked on that, and we'll be working on Quality Matters as we go along. So I just wanted to give you a sense as far as some of the types of documents that I've done and some of the types of opportunities you will be able to have when you work. And I can't stress to you enough how invaluable it is, and what a difference it does make. Now, what I wanted to mention to you as well is, as a consumer, there are times when you have no choice at all but to really write out a situation, explain it, document it, and get some action. I happen to live in Mount Pleasant Borough, which is about 6 miles from WCCC. I love living there. It's a great home, a great community. We have wonderful neighbors. But the property right behind my house is in Mount Pleasant Township. So that's a totally different municipality. Well, probably about 5 or 6 years ago, we were getting water damage. We were getting water runoff onto my porch, through my yard. It was like a stream. And the property owner behind me added approximately 50 more mobile homes, and I don't think they had the drainage capacity to deal with it. So we even contacted the Westmoreland Conservation District, and those are the people that have to do with water runoff. If you build a new housing complex in Westmoreland County, you have to have a water plan. What are you going to do with all these homes? You have to have a holding pond. Where does the water runoff go? And you have to develop a specific plan. So anyhow, what I had to do is I had to write a series of 15 letters in order to get action done. And so the action was I had to have a trench that ran from the mobile home property through my yard and then down into the storm sewer with, I don't know if it was a 1-inch pipe, but it was a really large pipe. And so it would take this water out of my property and deal with it. And I'm telling you, you cannot call the borough solicitor. You cannot speak to the borough manager. Many of these people you cannot speak to. They want you to put everything in writing. So that's what I did. I took pictures and I did all that. And it took about 2.5 years, and I finally was able to get the resolution. But that's a good example of that, because otherwise, you can talk until you're blue in the face, really, but you won't get needed action. But if you're prepared to do the paperwork and write the letters and be consistent, you can achieve action, but it takes consistent, ongoing action as a consumer. Now, I had a student in technical communication probably about 2 years ago named Ron Miller, and Ron told this story. He was a master machinist at Kennemental for many years, more than 30 years. You could tell he was a very, very good machinist. I had a couple people in class that were from there, and they sent the work, I believe, to India. But anyhow, Ron did pretty well at Kennemental, and he invested he had to manage his own retirement account. Well, he wanted to make a trade, and somehow either the broker or the broker's assistant did not do it, and so what happened is it wasn't processed. And I believe Ron ended up losing $30,000 or $35,000. And what he had to do then was contact a brokerage company. He contacts them and they say, well, that's too bad. I mean, there's nothing we can do about it. That's unfortunate. It was an oversight on our part. It won't happen again. And Ron said, I don't want to do that. He said, I want to make sure that I am compensated or that this mistake is handled. So he ended up contacting the Security and Exchange Commission, and then as a result, it took him a year from the beginning of the time that he started to the end. And they were trying to buffalo him and say, just give this up and we'll give you a settlement. And I think they offered $4,000 or $5,000. But he said, you know what, I want the whole amount. And this is unfair, and this is not a way to conduct business. So I had to go to the Securities and Exchange Commission, file a formal complaint, do documentation. I think he even had to get an attorney involved. Well, at the very end, he said that the very last day at 10 o'clock p.m., they sent him an email and said, we agree to settle with you. We will give you the $25,000. Attorney cost, and then there were some other costs that they gave him as compensation for lost time. But that's, he was really persistent and he wasn't giving up. But he said, you have to document and you have to follow up, because otherwise they'll just blow you off. So the other point that I wanted to mention to you is I had in technical communication a couple years ago, I had a student, her name was Karen, and she owned a Volkswagen. And at that time, some of the Volkswagens were known to have known sludge problems, meaning, when you'd get to 80 or 90,000 miles on the vehicle, the sludge would build up and then the engine would blow out and your engine wasn't effective. And so Volkswagen had some sort of fix with their vehicles to let consumers know that if this does happen with you, in fact, Volkswagen will reimburse you. They will install a Volkswagen engine. It might not have been a new one, it might have been a rebuilt one, but it's a comparable engine. It would be fine, and it would also have a warranty. Well, she contacts them, and then they contact her back and say, well, we only do this for consumers that had their oil change and all their services done with Volkswagen. Unless you have done, if you haven't done that, then the warranty is void. And that doesn't apply. I mean, I own a Honda Accord. I get the oil change in Monroe. I keep receipts of that. If I would have a problem with the engine or something else, as long as I can show that I was having regular maintenance, Honda obviously stands behind that warranty. Her boyfriend is a certified Audi and VW mechanic, and as a matter of fact, he is certified by Volkswagen of America. And so she had to really, really pursue this in order to get resolution, but she did get resolution. But again, her case took 6 or 7 months, but she had to call and write and follow up, and that's what you have to do. I know I often hear, I'm involved in PSEA, the Pennsylvania State Education Association, and I hear some legislators speak, and what they say is, if I get calls or I get emails or letters from 10 to 20 people, which really isn't a significant number, on an issue, I know it's an important issue because hundreds or thousands of other people are interested in it. So sometimes in writing or sometimes in making the contact, it's really important. And believe me, these days, if you go onto social media, such as if you go to the Facebook page for, Procter & Gamble, or if you're on Twitter, and you make a complaint and you say, Tide isn't as effective as it once was. It really doesn't take stains out. I'm not very pleased with Tide anymore. You're going to get a response in a day. Companies monitor that social media. Companies monitor negative feedback and so on, or any type of feedback, because it's really, really important. But that's what I'd really like to stress to you, that when you write as a consumer and you're persistent as a consumer, you are much, much more likely to get resolution, and that's what you have to keep in mind. They count on the majority of people giving up. I read a statistic. They said that less than 15%, it's more like 10% of all people will ever complain about a problem they've had. However, they said that close to 90% of people that write or contact a company about a problem or an issue will get some resolution. Good example of that is I have a Dell Inspiron, or a Dell Studio computer. I paid probably $1,200 for it. It's a very good computer. I use it quite extensively, but after I think my warranty was 2 years. After about 23 months, my keyboard, the white on the keys kind of wore out, and there were some other problems with it. And so I called Dell, and the first time they said, well, that's the way it happens, and there's nothing we can do about that. And then I called them again, and I said, this is not satisfactory. This should not happen. These keys should be etched. This should, it's a wireless keyboard, but I said there shouldn't be a problem with that. They sent me a new keyboard, and I was pleased by that. And just because, like I said, that I was very consistent and persistent about it. I recently went to Westmoreland Hospital and parked in the wrong parking garage. They didn't give me good instructions for an outpatient procedure. I wrote a letter to the hospital. Not only did they reimburse me for the parking, but they sent me a $15 Walmart gift card. I mean, it's not a lot, but it was something that I was not satisfied, and I wanted some resolution from that. So that's really important to think of as a consumer. Now, the other area that I wanted to tell you about is, as an employee, you're going to have to do accident reports, incident reports. Those are really very, very critical. You often have to do status reports, proposals. Very, very often you have to do letters, memos, especially email, but you can also do letter reports, memo reports, email reports. Those all come in You're going to work, as I mentioned earlier in this YouTube video, you're going to be working with your colleagues and producing longer reports, and that occurs. The biggest type of writing you will do is what you would call narrative type reports. In the police report writing class that I teach, you have to write affidavits of probable cause. You have to write a search warrant where you have to articulate the reason why you want to search a property. The magistrate can live next door to a drug house. He or she can watch activity in that house 24 hours a day, but that cannot be the magistrate cannot use his or her personal knowledge. It has to be called in the four corners. What you write in the four corners has to be articulated, because really when you search someone's home, someone's property, or whatever, that's a very serious situation, and you are infringing on that person's rights. And so you have to elaborate and you have to articulate what reasons there are for you to do that search, what justification there is, because as we know, we do have an expectation of privacy, but if you can articulate it, then obviously you can do it. I teach in the human services writing class we do social histories or you do sometimes medical histories. If you're a drug and alcohol counselor, what's the plan for this person? So you have to articulate that, and you do that. So that's very, very common, and that's very, very typical of the types of writing you have to do. Now, one other example that I wanted to share with you is in 2010, my father was admitted to the intensive care unit at Excella Westmoreland. And my dad, in the course of his life, he had Legionnaire's disease, which is very rare. He had prostate cancer. He had pancreatitis. He had quadruple heart bypass. He had stents placed into his neck, and I think he had surgery on his carotid artery. He had melanoma, which is skin cancer. I can't even imagine. He had probably 15 things that happened to him, but he lived to 76 years old, so he had a long, productive life. But towards the end of his life, he was starting to experience heart problems and so on. So he went to get a cardiac catheterization where they go into your leg, and then they put sort of a tube into you, and they look into your heart and basically check out and see how the heart's beating and so on. When he was on the table, when the cardiologist was doing that, he went into cardiac arrest. And so he became comatose, and he was admitted into the intensive care unit. So on the first night he was over there, my mother and I went over to check out what was happening. And in the ICU unit, each nurse only has one patient, or at the very most, two patients. My father's chart was this thick. It had all these results and everything. And so the nurse, for 2 hours, she went through the chart page by page. She looked at it. She looked at the record. And she looked at all the tests that were done. And then what she did was she started to take notes. And she had recommendations as far as these are types of other tests that should be done. These are types of medications that probably should be given. And then the other thing, too, which you probably don't know, is when you are comatose, your body assimilates medication at a different rate than it does when you're moving around. You metabolize it differently. And so in that particular case, they had to calculate the dosages a little bit differently. If they were going to give him a certain antibiotic and you're awake and moving around, your body assimilates it, but they adjust the dosages. So obviously they use math in that regard. But that really struck home with me as far as the really, really close reading skills, and then also the writing skills as far as that goes. I've known coworkers of mine here that had breast cancer, prostate cancer, or other types of significant medical issues, and they had to go through very, very extensive medical histories to get to the bottom of their issues or their complaints. And sometimes it can be rather involved. So what I'm trying to tell you is most people think, I'll do a certain amount of writing as a professional, I'll do a certain amount of writing as a consumer, and, it won't be that much. And maybe it won't be, who knows. But these days, you have to be prepared, and believe me, you have to be able to document and specify, why you're handling an issue a certain way, why you're doing it, and so on. That is really, really important. And just as an example, in a class that I taught, the criminal justice writing class, I had a man, Brian Burton, who was a Pennsylvania state trooper. At that time, he had about 25 years of experience. He's in my class. I'm teaching this criminal justice writing class. I've never been a police officer, but I mean, you don't need to be a police officer to teach a class like that. But he said, the most important thing as a state trooper is not only do you have to write it, but you also have to be able to testify it. Because when you go into court for certain types of issues, or certain types of criminal issues, there isn't an assistant district attorney there. Maybe the defendant will have an attorney, maybe not. But you have to present the case, and you have to tell the magistrate why you think the individual is guilty of a certain situation or not guilty. We went to the magistrate with a class of mine, and there was a trooper there that picked up a man for public intoxication. He was at the Sheets in Youngwood. He was talking on the telephone, and apparently the trooper saw him, and he was moving around back and forth and swaying a little bit, but he was just talking outside on the outdoor payphone. The trooper goes up to him, talks to him, smells him, determines that he had been drinking. He was on a bicycle. He was, riding around on a bicycle, and who knows, how far he had gone. You can get a DUI on a bicycle, by the way. But anyhow, to be publicly intoxicated, you have to visibly show that, and you have to be able to be observed walking or, making gestures and so on to indicate that you're intoxicated, and he didn't do that, and so the magistrate threw it out. But he wasn't able to articulate well enough as far as the reasons why he felt that the person met that criteria. So that's enough. I really have talked long enough today, but I really, wanted to express to you that, as you go throughout your career, and if you want to progress, your speaking, your writing, and your overall communication skills are important. And believe me when I tell you this, when you speak something and a person hears it, you have a little bit more wiggle room. But once you start to put something into writing and somebody looks at it, and then a month later the costs go up, well, why did this happen? And so you have to be able to explain that. But again, you have to be conversant in speaking and writing, and you have to do it fairly well. Thanks.